In this lesson, we will use the Netstat utility to assess organizational security. We are in the Netstat portion of the video series. This lesson is part of a video series that prepares you for the hands-on portion of the CompTIA Security Plus exam and is designed to give you hands-on experience with the exam. So what is the Netstat command? The Netstat command is a network utility that displays network connections, routing tables, and interface statistics. System administrators, network engineers, and anyone managing or troubleshooting network configurations are the ones who use it. It is used during network diagnostics, monitoring, and performance troubleshooting. It is executed in a Linux terminal on a system requiring network-related insights. It is also used to monitor active connections, analyze traffic, detect issues, or secure a network by reviewing open ports and connections. You can run Netstat by following the appropriate command, Netstat, and also options like TULN for listening ports, or to display the desired network data. The rest of the how is what this video is all about, so let's get into it. To get started, grab the companion guide from the link in the show notes below. Also, if you like this content, please make sure to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any new videos. Okay, so we have our companion guide. We have it on the left. We have our Ubuntu Linux terminal on the right. But before we get into the Netstat, I just want to go over our network configuration. So if you remember when we began in previous versions, this is what our environment looks like. So let me bring up a couple of these terminals so we can see what that looks like. So let's get this shrunken down and just give me a second. Okay, so this is what our environment looks like. So in the beginning course, we have our pfSense router. It's an open source router that you can get from pfsense.org. There's a tutorial in the show links that shows you how we set this up. But what I wanted to run you through is that we have a wide area interface of the 10.0.1.148. So you see that section over here. This is our wide area network on the pfSense. And we also have a local area network. This is the router. It's a 2-interface router, 172.16.1.1, and that's the interface over here, 172.16.1.1. And we also have a switch. All of this is being powered by VirtualBox. And then we have two hosts. The first host that you see here is the Ubuntu. Let's go ahead into a terminal session into the Ubuntu side by going into Control-T. And I'm just going to quickly look at the host name of this. More specifically, the IP address. So this is 172.16.1.101. This is our Ubuntu host. And I want to check to see if we have connectivity into Quad 1, which is Cloudflare. So we're going to do ping 1.1.1. Too many ones in there. And yes, so what's happening here is that we're pinging through this switch, through this router, out to the wide area network interface. And then we're going into the internet, and then we're hitting Quad 1. So I'm going to just stop that real quickly. So we came out through this interface. I'll exit out of this and then also just close out this terminal. And behind here, I have my Kali Linux box, which is this one over here. So same thing. It's all Debian based. I'm going to get into a terminal by going to Control-T. Let's make this a little bit bigger so we can see that. And I'm going to do the host name as well. And we see this is the 172.16.1.103. So this allows me to do a couple of things. I'm going to ping the Ubuntu box. So we see we have connectivity going through the switch and connecting directly to the Ubuntu box. I'll stop that as well. And I can also ping Google's DNS as well, 8.8.8. And this is what our environment looks like. It's a very small network. But what I wanted to bring your attention to is that we have the private network that's sitting here off of pfSense. This is the interface for the local area network, the wide area network. And if you want to set this up or need to have this environment replicated, the video links on how to download and install VirtualBox, pfSense, Kali Linux, and Ubuntu is in the show links below. So I just wanted to point that out before we get back to Netstat. So let's go ahead and get back into Netstat. Okay, so we're back into our Netstat lab. We're going to go back to the terminal session on the Debian-based side. So I'm going to maximize my screen so we can take a look at that. We're going to just make the terminal just a little bit bigger so we can see it. and I got in there the typical way, which is Control-Alt-T, but you can get there in the ways that you're familiar with. And the first thing we're going to do is see if we have Netstat installed. So I'm going to do netstat.version, and we see that we do have it installed. Okay, great. Let's say you didn't. It's part of the NetTools suite. Let's assume we didn't have it. We would just do sudo apt install, and we're going to do NetTools. And let's see if there's a net setup here. I'm going to put in my password. And you see that it's already installed as the newest version. If I didn't, it would go out and get the newest version, and then we would be all set. In this case here, we're looking pretty good. I'm going to clear my screen, and now we're just going to do netstat minus help to get the help screen up so we can see some of the options that we're looking at. So we have R, so it's netstat tac these switches or these options so we can get a little bit more information and more utility out of the interface and onto our box. So that's where we are. On some housekeeping, let me just go ahead and check this off, scroll this up, and now we're going to view all the connections. So let's get back onto the Ubuntu side. So I'm going to clear. Okay, then we're just going to run netstat proper. So I'm just going to do netstat. And Netstat's going to give me a number of options here. And let's just take a quick look at that. So I'm going to scroll back up here and see what do we have here. And let's analyze this. So we have active internet connections. So this is this device here. And we have a header line here that's going to give us the protocol. So it's going to tell us that we have TCP connections or UDP connections. If you look at the receive queue, this is going to give us the size and receive queues of bytes that are coming in. It's also going to give me the send aspect of this as well. This is the local address of the particular box that we're looking at. So in this case here, I'm on Ubuntu. Debian, the machine is called virtual-fmemory virtual box, which is, as you can see here in the command line. And the foreign address, there's a TCP connection, probably the the Kali Linux box, and it has a connection in here, which is part of the reason why we want to run netstat. So this is the foreign address. This is the device that is being connected. So if I go back to my map here, you see this is our address here, 101, and the foreign address is the Kali Linux because it has an SSH connection connected to it as well. So I'll go back here so we can see that. So this is the protocols, the setups here. Then we drop down and look at another set of information. So we have the protocol, always Unix. We have the reference count, which is going to give us how many processes are using the socket. We also have the flags, and at this point here, there's nothing in the flag, which is the socket type, if it's connected or not. Then we have datagrams or streams, which is what is the type of information. A datagram is essentially a postcard or a letter in the mail that's easy to send, but it's connectionless. So we're not going to get any type of feedback. It's just going to be a message in the bottle. You put a letter in the mail, you hope it's delivered, but you're never really sure. Whereas if you look at a stream, so this is a stream, and a stream is going to give us a connection. It's like making a phone call. So when you make a phone call, it rings. In TCP, we do the three-way handshake. We have a connection, and we are connected. And that is a connection-oriented connection, and you can verify that. Then we have some other information here. The state is connected. We have the inode, which is the specific node or the identifier. And then we have a path to the associated socket. We'll look at this a little bit more. For example, just real quickly, if you see this here, we can run a couple of commands like the netstat n. We'll drop down here to do that. But in the meantime, let me go here so we could take a look at it. So I'm going to clear the screen. I'm going to do a netstat minus n. In this case here, I'm just going to pipe more. So we could pipe it to more. So we can actually see this time I took out and the host name so we can see the numerical IP addresses. And we'll see this again when we go down a little deeper into the N side of it. But while we're here, this is the local IP address of this Ubuntu machine. And as you see here, this was the diagram that we looked at, 176.1.101, and it's listening on port 22, which is SSH. So we know that because in our ports, we see port 22, TCP or UDP, that's SSH. So we can see that here. And there's a foreign IP address, which is the Ubuntu machine, which is 172.16.1, and we see we have an established connection. That is the point behind Netstat. You can see connections or devices that are connected to your device. There are other things we can do as well, but while we're here, we also have 68. So this is the Ubuntu machine. We have port 68, and it has a foreign IP address, which is the router's interface, 172.16.1.1, and it's on 67. What exactly is this? We said boot P before, but this is DHCP. This is a DHCP service sitting on the router. So on 67 is the UDP port 67. We can see that over here for the server, and on the client side, 68 UDP, it's all here. So we can see all of this information if we ever needed to report out, or if we're doing any type of network statistics, hence the command. On that note, let's go back to that. So we're going to do some housekeeping here just to get all of this checked off. And it's good to just use this, as I mentioned before, more as a do list, not necessarily a checklist where we're going in step by step. And then I'm going to clear on the Ubuntu side, just so we can get back into, that was on more, so I'm just going to quit out of this. On the bottom you can see the clear to bring everything on top, and I'm going to Netstat, and we're just going to look at listening ports. So these are all the ports that we're listening on. So active internet connections, we have our protocol, our receive queue, send queue, all zeroed out. The local address is the Ubuntu machine, and foreign addresses, and we're just listening. And in this case here, we're listening for TCP. We have SSH, the Sun remote procedure call. We have the internet printing protocol domain. We're just listening, and this is all the ports: TCP, TCP6. We have UDP and UDP6, and this is what we're listening to. And we can just take a deeper look by protocol like TCP or UDP connections. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. For example, I only want to see the TCP connections. There's a lot of information here. I'm going to type clear. Now on this side, we're here. On this side, we're going to clear. And in this case here, I'm going to do a Netstat T. I just want to see all the TCP ports. So in this case here, and exactly what we expected. So we see TCP. This is the local virtual name, if you will, the host name of this Ubuntu box. This is the foreign IP address of the Kali Linux box. It has an SSH connection, and the state is established. Meanwhile, it has a connection tied into it. If I want to, combining with the N, I can just not resolve the host name. So we're going to do a T and combine the N, which is view numerical IP addresses. So you can see it's the same command here, but we have converted it to its IP address, giving us the same information, but resolving to numerical addresses. So that was Netstat T. Let's do the same thing for UDP, as we saw that before. So I'm back on the Ubuntu side. I clear, I do a Netstat, and let's just do UDP connections. And I can see all the UDP connections. And once again, this is boot P or DHCP, and it's connected to the pfSense router. If I want to look at numerical addresses, I can combine these and actually put in the N, and now we see that the N is going to allow us to view numerical addresses, not the host names, and now we can see the IP addresses proper. So with T and U, we were able to see both, and the numerical. So now let's look at process IDs. We may want to see what process ID, and this is when you want to see how much utilization is happening. So we can do a Netstat and just do a quick -P, and it's going to give us the process ID of the machine. So I'm going back in here. So this is the process ID and the process name. So we can stay in the Netstat. I can also go back down here to clear, And if I wanted to, I can do a number of things. I can do top, and I can look at process IDs this way as well. But since this is more of a Netstat command, we just wanted to show that you can look at the process IDs of connected devices using the Netstat command. And we'll leave it at that for now. So let's do our housekeeping here. I'm going to close out of the top command, clear to bring everything back up. And now let's go ahead and do a Netstat, and let's look at the routing table. So I'm going to do Netstat -R, and it's going to give me the routing table. So we see that we have a default route to the pfSense router. It has its general mask. It has the up flags, so we can see the different flags in here, and we see the interface. There's the link local, which is the local loopback 127.0.0.1, and then we also see this network here as well. While I'm here, let me just go ahead and pause into exam type of question, a sample Netstat question. So we have this here, we use the Netstat R. Here's a question you may see on an exam, on a certification exam. So we see what command or commands produce the following output. So we see this here. We know that Netstat did that, right? So let's go ahead, and we know Netstat is one here, but we see some other options. So obviously you won't have a terminal session available to you when you're taking your certification, but that's the whole point of these video series, which is to go through this, to get familiar with this, especially if you are a beginner. So we know interface config gives us some information here, but this is not the same thing as the command, so we know it's not that. So let's clear this. Let's do a trace route. I'm going to trace route to the Kali Linux box. So it was 172.16.1.103, and I get there in one hop, so it's not that command. So it's not the trace route. Trace route is going to show us the path from one device to another and the number of routers and the path that it has taken, so it's not that command. Let's go to ARP. The ARP cache is an IP to MAC address table, so that way when you get to the last mile, when we get to the IP, we can deliver it to the network interface, so we need to know what the hardware address is. It's not that command. So let's go ahead and look at the route command. And the route command looks exactly the same thing as Netstat -R. Same exact command, outputs, different commands. The route command, Netstat R, same thing. So if I had to answer this question as a sample question, Netstat and route will give us the following output, and you just scored some points. And that's, again, part of the reason why we want to go through this series, so we can get familiar with the utilities. And even if the 7.0 certification, the 701 series, doesn't have the specifics, we think it's still worthwhile that you go through this and get familiar with these commands, Netstat. So while we're at it, we looked at interface config. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the other options that we have. We're going to clear. I'm going to bring the Netstat and -I so we can see the interface. And bring this up so you can see some options here. So we have two interfaces on this device. We have the Ethernet card that's connected. For example, more specifically on the Ubuntu, there's an Ethernet card that's coming out here, connecting to this switch here. So we're monitoring this interface. And this interface has a maximum transfer unit, or packet size, if you will, 1500. It has received 223 packets. No dropped errors, no receive errors, no overrun errors. It's looking good. And it also has a transmit side. And on the transmit side, we have 296 came out of this interface. So we have receive and transmit, no errors, and we have some flags. On these flags, you see the BMRU, you have broadcast, multicast, running, and up. So we know this is a healthy interface. And we have same thing with the loopback. So we have the local loopback, which is the 127.0.01, and it has a slightly bigger MTU because it's local. And we see the stats for it as well. So this is the receive stats. These are the transmit stats. And we see it's the loopback, it's running, and it's up. So Netstat can give you some interface information, but we also used ifconfig to see some of this information as well. If config is going to give us the specific IP address that's connected to this interface. We see the MAC address. We could have gotten that from the ARP cache as well, but we get some of this transmit and receive numbers as well. They're close. The reason why there's a little bit of movement is because I'm connected here, so we're still receiving some packets, and I ran it slightly delayed. If I did this back to back, netstat-i and interface config, these numbers would be the same, and we don't have any dropped transmissions on the Ethernet interface card or on the loopback, and the loopback is looking more or less the same. 94 transmit, 94 transmit, looking good on the receive. So let's just see if that's true. If I do this back to back, I'm going to do the netstat -i, and I'm just going to do an if config right away, and the numbers are fairly close here. So you see the transmit is 298, transmit is 298, looking pretty good as we mentioned. So let's go ahead and do our housekeeping. Okay, so now let's continue. Let's display some network statistics. So we may want to just get a report out of our network or our interface. So I'm going to clear to get rid of some of the previous commands. We're going to do a netstat, and this time we're going to throw the -s, and it's going to break down our statistics versus IP, the Internet Control Message Protocol, which was the ping that we did earlier. It has a further breakdown of ICMP messages if you need to have a detailed analysis. Then it breaks it down by protocol, TCP, UDP packets, a little bit more deeper analysis, and of course you can pipe or redirect this to a file for further analysis or for historical purposes. So you have this option as well with the network stat, netstat-s. So let's go ahead and take that off. We'll clear the screen to get back on top, and we'll just do a netstat verbose. So we can always do a slightly verbose. It didn't like the way I did that because I didn't type it properly. This is going to give us a little bit more wordy, which is what the verbose part is all about. And then we'll also go to netstat continuous. So this is if you want to see things in real time. You can throw the -c, and it's going to show us connections as they are coming online. So you can have a continuous view of this rather than the one time. And if you notice, it just popped up because we're having some more connections. You can do this one of two ways. You can do the netstat C, but we also have the netstat watch-n to nstat. So I'll just throw that just for fun so you can have that, and let's just see what that looks like. Watch -n to netstat, and this is going to do the same thing that you saw with the continuous option as well. You can decide which one works best for you. I just wanted to just show you the netstat because we're actually doing a netstat tutorial. So let's do some housekeeping, and let's do some combination as I mentioned before. So we're going to clear. Actually, let me come here, Control Z to close out of this. We'll clear, and we can combine some of the switches as you saw before. So I have my netstat. I can do -L to listen, -P for a port, -T for TCP, and it's going to combine all of these into one command. And this is the TCP ports with all the ones that are listening. And we also want to get the process ID if it has it. So the TLP. We don't have to write it like this. We can combine it into one string. So this is TCP, UDP, non-numerical, or give us the numerical addresses. In other words, no host name, listening, and the process ID. And we can combine the whole thing that way as well. You don't have to tease it out, -tac each option. And then last but not least, as we said, we know that the Kali Linux was connecting to the Ubuntu machine. We want to see that in real time. Let's get a little bit more information on it. So we're going to do sudo netstat, and we're going to combine TCP, numerical IP addresses, process ID, all, and we're going to grep that. We're going to grep SSH, and of course we have to throw the password in. And I can see that the foreign address is Kali Linux. It's an established connection. It's running SSH, and it's the user associated with it is the fmerin. Let's see this in real time. I'm going to switch over to the Kali Linux. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm on the Kali Linux side, and we see this part here. I'm going to do it two ways. So here I am. I'm on the Kali Linux. I'm going to just go ahead and SSH into the unit. And it says here, and if you notice, we changed from Kali Linux to this Ubuntu machine. In other words, I'm back here. So if you see this here, we have now two sessions that are happening. So to make this a little bit easier, let's get out of both. I'm going to exit. This session was closed. I'm going to close out of this terminal session as well. So we're out of this one. Let's see if we don't have any more. So this one should be fine. And then when we run back into here, we still have that session set up over here as well. So I closed one and opened another. The whole point of this here is that we can look at connections directly in real time. So this one was before, we had two, now we only have one because we closed one of our sessions. I'm going to do some housekeeping. And then it would be worth mentioning that the Netstat command is somewhat deprecated, in other words, not as popular, and is part of the NetTools suite, as you know, and the NetTools suite has essentially been replaced by more modern tools. That said, if we go back here, you can use the SS command. It does the same thing. It stands for socket statistics. Same thing, you run SS and it's going to look and behave, for the most part, very similar to Netstat. I just wanted to call that out as a difference, but because this is giving you real world experience as well as exam prep, it was helpful to pull out both. So if we want to be a little bit more thorough, I can do SS for sockets statistics and use the same shortcuts that we were using before to show us the connection state, the net ID in terms of the protocols being used. So this was TCP, UDP, give us the numerical address we're listening, and the process IDs. So you have your choice. As with all of these commands, I'm going to end where we started, which is you can always get a little bit more help on Netstat, TAC help. This is where we started. And of course, we can go to the man table, which is you can use the manual and do Netstat. And it says it doesn't have that because it was misspelled. So let's do the right spelling. And there we have it. So we showed how you can look at connections. More specifically, we showed an SSH connection, a secure shell. In the next lesson, we'll actually show how we can install the secure shell client, the server, and we'll start to manage remote administration through SSH. But that's for the next class. What we wanted to do here was walk you through Netstat. Looking forward to seeing you in the next lesson.